Okay, so I'm here with Mark Taylor, who is the Managing Director of Britannia Bureau, which is now part of the wider Customs Support Group, and he is here to explain more about how duty management services work. So do you want to tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, hi everybody, and thank you for your time. My name is Mark Taylor. A little bit about myself. I've been involved with freight, forwarding, logistics all my career for my sins, best part of 40 odd years now. Really since 2010, I set up a business that focused solely on customs, international trade and bureau duty management. Reason being, predominantly, myself and my colleagues at the time saw a gap in the industry, gap in the market within the freight forwarding community, and it's essentially what this gap is the idea that an importer or an exporter would assume that a freight forwarding company is the font of all knowledge, all things customs, import and export declarations. Reason being, of course, is that the freight forwarder moves the product from A to B, and across a border, they are generally responsible for facilitating the border clearance. And that is the difference, facilitating a border clearance as opposed to genuinely managing somebody's duty, compliance and customs issues. So that's where the gap essentially we identified was. And that's why I set up the business that focused not on freight forwarding, but purely on customs and international trade practices as a neutral and independent advisor.
So when you first started up the company, you had a bit of a focus on doing sort of customs health checks and quick scans of businesses to sort of assess their customs health. Do you want to talk us through a little bit about that?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, how we set up the business was a view that rather than simply managing a process, it was about adding value for the client in that specific scope of customs and international trade. And therefore, the logical starting point, if you're wanting to add value for a customer, is to understand a little bit about their needs, about their aspirations, about their own strategies and growth, and about their own business. And the best way of doing that was to formalise that by way of what I described as a customs health check. So the process would have been to provide the prospect, the trader, with a questionnaire, and by using a consultative approach, spending time out to understand things such as their duty spend and VAT spend, what products they import and export, where they'll be importing from, where their sales channels are, where they sell to, do they store goods in the UK for any length of time, do they have their own warehouse, do they use a 3PL warehouse, what reporting tools do they use, what ERP systems, what visibility they've got, do they already have customs regimes in place and various standards they already have, and do they already have certain benefits from that. And the idea is, by asking those basic questions, we build a picture of that customer as we see them, and then by being able to quantify those values, we can estimate what certain benefits would be arising for setting up regimes like customs warehousing or simplified clearancing processes. And by having that, we will provide them with a feedback presentation where we quantify the benefit and then provide them details of the actual cost to deliver such a solution. And that's really the starting point of our business methodology.
So Mark, can you give us an example of a solution that you've provided one of these companies off the back of a customs health check?
Absolutely, yes. It was one of the first customers we started working with. Presented to them a health check questionnaire, understood that they had a turnover of around about 300 to 400 million per annum. So the first fundamental question I asked them was what their duty spend was. I established that on a monthly basis it's between 300 and 400,000 pounds of duty per month. And then I asked them, of that duty, what percentage of that was sold in the UK, what percentage was sold in Europe and then worldwide. It transpired that over 50% of their sales were in fact outside of the UK. And that actually told me that over 50% of their current duty spend could be reduced by virtue of setting up a customs approved warehouse, which we obviously quantified and gave them feedback in our presentation. When they saw the figures, which were indeed seven-figure savings, both retrospectively and going forward, they very quickly instructed us to start the project. I'm very pleased to report it was a success, and as we work with them today, some 10 years later on, we are currently enjoying working alongside a company that now turns over between £3 and £4 billion per annum.
In terms of with the savings that you've provided this company, what are the sorts of situations that might hold a company back from seeking this sort of customs health scan?
I think half the problem really is helping an importer or an exporter actually understand what the challenges are. And much of it is actually fear. If I can kind of translate this into our normal working lives, if you're working for a company and you receive your pay packet and you know roughly speaking what you'll be receiving every single month, you're not necessarily going to look at your PAYE code and work out that you could actually, if you change the code, receive certain tax refunds and benefits from doing so. The general rule of thumb for most people would be to play on the safe side. We do not want to ruffle the feathers of the government. We do not want to get into trouble. We want to be compliant. It's exactly the same with customs and duty aspects. If you're a compliant business and you want to remain so, you feel somewhat nervous about the idea of actually tinkering with your duty spend, and the idea that you might be able to claim back duty or claim certain economies of duty spend by reclassifying goods or setting out regimes with benefits. It can be quite daunting, and a lot of companies are not so much put off by that, but the challenge for a company like us is to help explain to the business what the opportunities are, what the benefits could be, so that they can understand what the challenges are and what value we can add to their company.
So what kind of qualities do you think that businesses need to look out for when they're searching for duty management services?
I think ultimately they'll be looking for credibility, neutrality and trust in the services that are provided. And one thing I'd like to emphasise, of course, is that those are all the qualities that actually are possessed within Customs Support Group. We know the work we do is good. We know through our own endeavours we have good credibility with existing customers, and by having a good credibility with existing customers and by doing good deeds, word of mouth ultimately leads to the biggest amount of development of business through recommendation and referrals.
Lovely. Thank you so much, Mark.
Thank you.